Yes.
I need to record. Okay, we should be live, Beena.
Hello, hello, and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Grain. And good mornings to everyone who is going to join us live and will watch us recorded later. So, as to be appropriate, I'm learning to be appropriate, Syl. Good mornings.
Good morning, Beena. Good morning. Lovely, lovely.
giving you time to respond and not
Yeah,
just
it's
like
very
da,
important.
da, da, da,
Very
da, da.
important. It's
See, we
just to
always
me,
learn.
it's like, my natural politeness. If you say good morning,
Of course, it has to
can you
be.
not say it
I'm
back?
Oh, definitely, but I was not considering it. So it was my
Yeah,
carelessness about this that I was just
that's all
saying
good.
in a row, like, okay, yes, it's like
Yes, yes. Well, you're
okay.
also giving me space to do my things, but
That's why
just to
I
say good
trained my mind.
morning, yeah, that doesn't take me out of my sharing and all of that. So not a problem.
Exactly. But we are learning, and as
Yes, exactly.
I am
Always learning.
okay. This is the first time in my life I'm doing this, and I did when I were the first time I did this. So I never had this training, any kind of
Yeah,
training for this.
yeah,
I never did that before in any kind of form or shape. I never did that. So
yeah.
this is how I'm learning right away. It is
Learning
exactly
wonderfully.
like someone just push you in ocean or in a
Right.
pool, and then you have to learn to swim. So
Yes.
yes, in the beginning, I might be like trying to swim like a frog or a duck, or and now
Yeah.
I'm trying to swim like like a fish. Maybe at some point I will learn to swim like sharks, because for
There
me
you
they
go.
swim wonderfully. It's a
Yes.
sight to
Yes.
watch them.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
amazing, super
Oh yeah.
amazing for me. I don't know
Oh yeah.
that it is significant for others or not, but for me, they are wonderful,
So
wonderful
I do like
swimmers.
watching sharks swim. They have that relaxed ease
Exactly.
with power as well. It's
They
very awesome.
completely own this. No
Yeah.
overwhelming, like no push, no
Yeah. Right. Right.
aggressiveness, nothing. It's
Yeah.
like they completely own this whole ocean. It's like they
Yeah.
are just everything is just in their favor.
Wonderful,
Absolutely
Beena.
magnificent
Wonderful.
for me.
Wonderful.
So for me, if you have to have this type of a skill, keep this thing in mind that as sharks
Yeah.
swim,
Yeah.
this is the ease I want to acquire
Yeah.
in my all my skills, whatever I
Yeah.
want to acquire. I want to find that and acquire that finesse what they
Yes.
have.
Yes. To me, it is to be able to be at peace with your own power,
Exactly.
which to me is
Exactly.
grace.
Absolutely. They have graceful
Yes. Right. But
that whole being.
it's grace that is incorporating power. The sharks are very powerful.
Yes.
And they're
Oh
powerful
yes.
swimmers, right? They're very powerful
Yes.
swimmers. And so
Yes.
that's the key point with sharks specifically.
Exactly.
Because you see dolphins can also swim, but they have a more energetic and they're graceful as well, but
Dolphins
not quite the
dolphins
same.
have joy. Dolphins have
Yes,
joy.
yes,
Dolphins like are like teenagers of the ocean
right,
for me. They
right,
have
right.
this dopamine, like yes,
Yeah,
sing
yeah, yeah,
in that.
yeah,
Yes, they
yeah,
are like
yeah, yeah.
teenagers of the ocean.
Um,
But sharks are like really owners, like the way
yes,
they swim. I'm not saying in any
yes,
hierarchy,
yes,
but it is
yes,
just the way they are, their beingness. As Syl
yeah.
says very precisely, grace. They
Grace,
have
right.
grace.
The grace of owning your power, your moreness. This is very important.
Exactly.
It's hard to do
Exactly.
as well. Right? Very hard to do. All right. On a related topic, since we're talking about things swimming in ocean, I want to talk about Walrus-Logic. Okay. This is about
Oh yes.
contextual appreciation. So
Oh
mostly you
yes.
say, okay, Google walrus. And what are you going to see? Typically, you're going to see a walrus on a pier, sitting somewhere on a pier or on the beach or something. Yeah,
Yes.
usually when you
Yes.
Google walrus.
Yes.
Why? Why are you seeing walrus? Yeah, they spend a lot of time basking in the sun, but it's an aquatic animal. It's not a land animal. It spends time on land, but only thing it does is bask in the sun on land.
Hmm.
Doesn't do anything else, right? when it's on the surface, right? That's all it does. Nothing else. Yeah.
Ah,
Right. Okay. I don't know. Maybe they do mating on land too. I'm not sure if they mate on land or in the water. But anyway, that's mainly what they're doing. 90%, 99%. But my point is, so when we think of a walrus, and you see a walrus on the pier there, and they're moving, they're very awkward and they're very ungainly, and they just look awkward and ungainly and clumsy and whatever, right? And
yes.
not, but now we think of a walrus and we associate the walrus with being awkward and clumsy and ungainly.
Hmm.
That's really the word, ungainly. Yeah. But this is a false association. That's not the walrus's habitat. So when it comes to walruses, pay attention to the walrus when it is in its more natural habitat, which is underwater. Whole different story. There's no clumsiness
Hmm.
or awkwardness or ungainliness of the walrus underwater. Yeah. So the
Wow.
perception of walrus when you see it underwater, wow, okay, wow, this thing can swim, this thing can move, this is gorgeous. It's a big thing, but it doesn't matter. It's still got the grace and fluidity to it, yeah? And this is important. Why? Because it's about contextual appreciation, contextual appropriateness. So
Yes.
when we gauge and assess a war, anything, we need to do so in its appropriate environment. When this comes to people, this is especially important. We almost never see people in their environment, in their vibe, right? So just as a simple example, you take a nerd and you see them at school or
Hmm.
at work or whatever, and they're all awkward and uncomfortable. But get that nerd in his field, whatever it is, beekeeping, computers, whatever, doesn't matter, gaming, whatever. They're an expert. They know exactly what they're doing, and they see, you have to gauge people in their appropriate contexts. It's very important, very, very important. Otherwise, you can get a completely inaccurate idea. Yes, like the walrus. So walrus logic, very, very, very powerful. Yeah, Beena? Make
Yes.
sense?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Super,
Absolutely
super
makes
powerful.
sense.
Yeah,
And also it is making like it is giving another dimension, not dimension, but
yeah,
yes, another confirmation that why the context is so important. That's why I always appreciate when
exactly.
we are reading
Exactly.
Carlos about Don Juan. When we are reading this without having a context,
Yeah,
it is
right.
difficult to have clarity about the perspective,
Yeah,
at least about the abstract perspective.
yeah,
Pretty sure that it will be impossible, almost impossible, to get that because you need to have that context. And luckily with you, we have this thing. Not only that you were experiencing this, okay, not
yeah,
completely directly, but you were in that directly influenced generation that
yeah,
okay, yes,
yeah,
so they
yeah,
were influenced by that,
yeah,
so you
yeah,
were that, but also you had access to other information and awareness also, and you
yeah,
still have that access. So now we have almost a complete picture. We can
yeah,
have that,
yeah.
and that's when you have a complete picture of anything, then you can acquire an abstract perspective. So we are
Exactly.
lucky that you can provide the context for this reading, because it can be misleading. It
Yeah,
can, because they are very influential, very interesting. I must say that they are very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
But if you don't have like all the planets, they float like okay, yes, all in the space, but they all have some orbit. They don't float
yeah.
randomly. The orbit for
Exactly.
me, having an orbit is having a
Exactly.
context.
And and we assume the planets are revolving around the sun.
Oh yes,
But
that's it.
but
Let's do it.
we don't see the sun's orbit. What is the sun orbiting? We don't
A
see that.
different story. A different story.
Right? So now when you take in the greater universe, because things are very far away, but that doesn't mean the sun isn't moving relative to other stars and other galaxies. Everything is moving. We can't always see the greater context. Yeah. So that means
Yeah.
that, yes, the planets are revolving around the sun, but the sun is revolving around other things, maybe revolving around a galaxy, yeah, or a group of suns or whatever. Right. Who knows? but the whole movement is also moving. How cool is that? And then
Okay.
that galaxy may be moving relative to other galaxies or black holes, or everything is moving in a greater context that we're unaware of. And I find that too fascinating and too fantastic. Yes. Context is super, super important. We can never, ever forget context. I remember when the concept of context came to me as a child. There was a visual associated with it. The visual didn't make any sense, but nonetheless, it made me realize that, hey, context is super important. It's something to really pay attention to. Yeah. I thought that was quite something. That's quite something. Yeah.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
important.
Yes.
All right. We are continuing with Don Juan's efforts to get Carlos to capital P perceive. Yeah. Now he's using all sorts of different elements to do this. And also he's got other agendas. Well, he wants him to learn a whole bunch of things. But in order to perceive, he has to learn the warrior's way, for one. Two, he has to understand the world as a description. And then he has to learn specific skills like will. Yeah. So many, many
Yes.
different skills here. But the overview is capital P perception. And the capital P perception is for a greater purpose, which we'll come to later. Right? Or the end result is personal freedom, of course. He hasn't mentioned that specifically yet, but that's implied. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Now let's see.
So, for any newcomer who is going to join us now,
Oh,
what we are doing, we are busy with doing capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan, with a very specific intent
oh,
is to connect with Don Juan, to connect with the intent. And also, just to give you a brief idea about what is capital R reading, capital R reading is a very profound concept, and and mechanism also from Way-Of-Impeccability and Moreness-Culture, in which we read beyond the words. We read beyond the story. We read beyond the characters and like their visual appearance and their physical existence and all what they are doing. We go beyond that. And in this process, of course, we learn, capital L, learn more than what has been obviously shared. It's a
yeah.
profound process. It can be life transformative if you keep practicing it. First, of course, with the reading books or listening to books, and then, of course, it is going to you can spread it to in everything. You can acquire any skill, whatever you want to be in your life, whatever skill you want to acquire. If you can use it to transform your relationship with your, of course, with your spouse, with your parents, with your family, with your friends, with yourself, with the universe, you can
Oh,
transform, because capital R reading always gives you more information than what you have been ever expected. So this is a profound concept. So we are going to start, and you have to read because I cannot read.
all right. No problem,
Yes.
Beena. No problem. I shall read. I shall read. I shall read. I do enjoy reading, gotta say. It's fun. Fun. All right. There we go. There we go. Now we're getting very. Okay. So Don Juan is doing a very specific exercise. Carlos has smoked the smoking mixture again, but he's also this time Don Juan is using his spirit catcher to produce an effect which is going to leverage Carlos's perception. And the task for him is to perceive the holes in inverted commas. And these holes are obviously abstract holes, but they visually appear like holes, but they are holes in sound. Anyway, so we'll just continue where we're reading. If you want more detail, just look at yesterday's um, live. You can find it on well, in the group, in the guide, and also on YouTube, of course. All right. I was trying to get TikTok to work yesterday. I did the thing for TikTok and it worked, and today it doesn't. Just fascinating. Yeah. Same exact procedure. Yeah. Who knows? It's too amazing. Too amazing. All right. I heard the piercing wail of Don Juan's spirit catcher. It did not jolt me, but the sounds again ceased for an instant, and I perceived such a cessation as a hole, a very large hole. At that precise moment, I shifted my attention from hearing to looking. I was looking at a cluster of low hills with lush green vegetation. The silhouette of the hills was arranged in such a way that from the place where I was looking, there seemed to be a hole on the side of one of the hills. It was a space in between two hills, and through it I could see the deep, dark grey hue of the mountains in the distance. For a moment I did not know what it was. It was as if the hole I was looking at was not the hole in the sound. Then the noises began again, but the visual image of the huge hole remained. A short while later, I became even more keenly aware of the pattern of sounds and their order, and the arrangement of their pauses. My mind was capable of distinguishing and discriminating among the enormous number of individual sounds. I could actually keep track of all the sounds. Thus, each pause between sounds was a definite whole. At a given moment, the pauses became crystallized in my mind and formed a sort of solid grid, a structure. I was not seeing or hearing it. I was feeling it with an unknown part of myself. Yeah, very powerful, this, right? We have to realize that we can feel with unknown parts of ourselves, right? This is part of capital P perception, that we can feel with unknown parts of ourselves, right? This is very, 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 very crucial. Very, very crucial. Very important to understand, right, Beena?
Yes.
It's a
Yeah,
substantial shift of conception, right?
exactly.
Substantial shift of conception. Oh, suddenly we went offline on all of our things. I don't know why. Anyway, hello, Cora Sanchez has joined us on IG. So hello, hello, hello. Brilliant. All right, let's continue. Don Juan played his string once again. The sounds ceased as they had done before, creating a huge hole in the sound structure. This time, however, that big pause blended with a hole in the hills I was looking at. They became superimposed on each other. The effect of perceiving two holes lasted for such a long time that I was capable of seeing, hearing their contours as they fit one another. Then the other sounds began again, and their structure of pauses became an extraordinary, almost visual perception. I began seeing the sounds as they created patterns, and then all those patterns became superimposed on the environment in the same way I had perceived the two big holes becoming superimposed. I was not looking or hearing as I was accustomed to doing. I was doing something which was entirely different, but combined features of both. For some reason, my attention was focused on the large hole in the hills. I felt I was hearing it and at the same time looking at it. In other words, I was perceiving it. Anyway, capital P perceiving it. There was something of a lure about it. It dominated my field of perception, and every single sound pattern which coincided with the feature of the environment was hinged on that hole. Wow, interesting. I heard once again the eerie wail of Don Juan's spirit catcher. All other sounds stopped. The two large holes seemed to light up, and next I was looking again at the ploughed field. The ally was standing there as I had seen him before. The light of the total scene became very clear. I could see plainly, as if he were 50 yards away. I could not see his face. His hat covered it. Then he began to come towards me, lifting his head slowly as he walked. I could almost see his face, and that terrified me. I knew I had to stop him without delay. I had a strange surge in my body. I felt an outflow of power. I wanted to move my head to the side to stop the vision, but I could not do it. At that crucial instant, a thought came to my mind. I knew what Don Juan meant when he spoke of the items of a path with heart being the shields. There was something I wanted to do in my life, something very consuming and intriguing, something that filled me with great peace and joy. I knew the ally could not overcome me. I moved my head away without any trouble. before I could see his entire face. I began hearing all the other sounds. Then they suddenly became very loud and shrill, as if they were actually angry with me. They lost their patterns and turned into an amorphous conglomerate of sharp, painful shrieks. My ears began to buzz under their pressure. I felt that my head was about to explode. I stood up and put the palms of my hands to my ears. Don Juan helped me walk to a very small stream, made me take off my clothes, and rolled me in the water. He made me lie on the almost dry bed of the stream, and then gathered some water in his hat and splashed me with it. The pressure in my ears subsided very rapidly, and it took only a few minutes to wash me. Don Juan looked at me, shook his head in approval, and said I had made myself solid in no time at all. I put on my clothes, and he took me back to the place where I had been sitting. I felt extremely vigorous, buoyant, and clear-headed. He wanted to know all the details of my vision. He said that the holes in the sounds were used by sorcerers to find out specific things. A sorcerer's ally would reveal complicated affairs through the holes in the sounds. He refused to be more specific about the holes and sloughed off my questions, saying that since I did not have an ally, such information would only be harmful to me. Everything is meaningful for a sorcerer. The sounds have holes in them, and so does everything around you. Ordinarily, a person does not have the speed to catch the holes, and thus they go through life without protection. The worms, the birds, the trees, all of them can tell us unimaginable things, if only one could have the speed to grasp their message. The smoke can give us that grasping speed, but we must be on good terms with all the living things of this world. This is the reason why we must talk to plants we're about to kill and apologize for hurting them. The same thing must be done with the animals we are going to hunt. We should take only enough for our needs. Otherwise, the plants and animals and the worms we have killed would turn against us and cause us disease and misfortune. A warrior is aware of this and strives to appease them. So when he peers through the holes, the trees and birds and the worms give him truthful messages. But all this is not important now. What is important is that you saw the ally. That is your game. I've told you that we were going to hunt for something. I thought it was going to be an animal. I figured that you were going to see the animal we had to hunt. I myself saw a wild boar. My spirit catcher is a wild boar. Do you mean the spirit catcher is made out of a wild boar? No, nothing in the life of a sorcerer is made out of anything else. If something is anything at all, it is the thing itself. If you knew wild boars, you would realize my spirit catcher is one. Why did we come here to hunt? The allied showed you a spirit catcher that he got from his pouch. You need to have one if you are going to call him. What is a spirit catcher? It is a fiber. With it, I can call the allies, or my own ally, or I can call the spirits of waterholes, the spirits of rivers, the spirits of mountains. Mine is a wild boar and cries like a wild boar. I used it twice around you to call the spirit of the waterhole to help you. The spirit came to you as the ally came to you today. You could not see it, though, because you did not have the speed. However, that day I took you to the water cannon and put you on a rock. You knew the spirit was almost on top of you without actually seeing it. Those spirits are helpers. They are hard to handle and sort of dangerous. One needs to be impeccable. One needs an impeccable will to hold them at bay. What do they look like? They are different for every person, and so are the allies. For you, an ally would apparently look like a man you once knew, or like a man you will always be about to know. That's the bent of your nature. You're given to mysteries and secrets. It's not like you. I'm not like you. So an ally for me is something very precise. Very important point here. It's custom. It's custom. It's custom. We tend to want to assume that meaning and symbols are the same for everybody. Yes, they can be, but just because they can be doesn't mean they always are. And it's very important to make that discernment distinction. Very, 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 very critical. Yes, very important. Very, very important. Otherwise, we get lost in these ideas, right? And we don't understand what's going on, and we misinterpret things because we are taking somebody else's interpretation. Yeah. I mean, you may have a similar personality to Carlos or Don Juan and therefore see the allies in a similar way. It doesn't mean the allies are going to be that way for everybody. Again, walrus logic. Yes, it applies here too. Don't assume things, assume context and assume, no, especially with symbols and stuff like this. It's personal,
Yes.
personal, personal, personal. Very important. Yeah, Beena?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
It is
yeah,
always
very, very
different
crucial.
cultures, different understanding,
Yeah.
have completely different meaning of different things.
Right,
Yes.
right. But that doesn't mean that it can't overlap. And generally, people tend to, in some instances, have the same perceptions, right?
Yes.
But just because you are sometimes the same doesn't mean you're always the same. This is very key understanding. We make this mistake regularly, and it causes a lot of trouble. Right? All right. I'm not like you. So an ally for me is something very precise. Sorry, Bina, did you want to say something else?
No, no, no. I'm listening.
All right.
No.
The spirits of the water holes are proper to specific places. The one I call to help you is one I have known myself. It has helped me many times. Its abode is that canyon. At the time I called it to help you, you were not strong and the spirit took you hard. That was not its intention. They have none. But you were lying there very weak, weaker than I suspected. Later on, the spirit nearly lured you to your death. In the water at the irrigation canal, you were phosphorescent. The spirit took you by surprise and you nearly succumbed. Once the spirit does that, it always comes back for its prey. I'm sure it will come back for you. Unfortunately, you need the water to become solid again when you use the little smoke. That puts you at a terrible disadvantage. If you don't use the water, you will probably die. But if you do use it, the spirit will take you. Can I use the water at another place? It doesn't make any difference. The spirit of the water hole around my house can follow you anyway, unless you have a spirit catcher. That is why the ally showed it to you. He told you that you need one. He wrapped it around his left hand and came to you after pointing out the water canyon. Today he again wanted to show you the spirit catcher, as he did the first time you met him. It was wise of you to stop. The ally was going too fast for your strength, and a direct jolt with him would have been injurious to you. How can I get a spirit catcher now? Apparently the ally is going to give you one himself. How? I don't know. You will have to go to him. He has already told you where to look for it. Where? Up there, on those hills where you saw the hole. Would I be looking for the ally himself? No, but he's already welcome you. The little smoke has opened your way to him. Then, later on, you will meet him face to face. But that will happen only after you know him very well. Very interesting. We came to the same shift here, 16. I don't know, I think this is, I don't know, chapter 16, I guess. Doesn't say, it just says 16 at the top. Oh, wow. We arrived in the same valley in the late afternoon of December 15, 1969. Don Juan mentioned repeatedly as we moved through the shrubs that directions or points of orientation were of special importance in the endeavor I was going to undertake. Cardinal directions are very important in Don Juan's sorcery world, right? The sorcery aspect of Don Juan. We have to be very cautious here and also just very discerning to understand that Don Juan has the sorcery side and there's kind of a non-sorcery side. And in the non-sorcery side, they don't have any prominence. But in the sorcery side, very, very prominent, very important. Right? Very
Yep.
interesting, very interesting. That this is of such importance. But that whole sorcery world, it's got its own rules and own logic, and it's a very convoluted system. And it's just like, you know. Anyway, I guess it's like our world. There's a lot of rules and stuff to it. Yeah, it's not very
Point.
simple.
Yes.
Anyway, uh, you must determine the right direction immediately upon arriving at the top of a hill. As soon as you are on the top, face that direction. He pointed to the southeast. That is your good direction, and you will always face it, especially when you're in trouble. Remember that. We stopped at the bottom of the hills where I had perceived the hole. He pointed us at a specific place where I had to sit down. He sat next to me and in a very quiet voice gave me detailed instructions. He said that as soon as I reached the hilltop, I had to extend my right arm in front of me with the palm of my hand down and my fingers stretched like a fan, except for the thumb. So that would be like this, right? The thumb in, which had to be tucked against the palm, or maybe like this then, right? Next, I had to turn my head to the north and fold my arm over my chest, pointing my hand out also towards the north. Then I had to dance, putting my left foot behind the right one, beating the ground with the tip of my left toes. He said that when I felt a warmth coming up my left leg, I had to begin sweeping my arms slowly from north to south and then to the north again. All right. Now, sometimes these directions, Carlos, is communicating it to us through words. Now, again, with the palm, with the finger, the thumb, is it here or is it there? Yeah, we don't know unless you're being shown. Does it really matter? I have no idea. Yeah, it
Yes.
may or may not. But this is my point with these sorcery things. Many times, and there are other things that Don Juan Carlos says, well, Don Juan told him more, and he doesn't relay the specific details. So we know we are missing the full picture. So you cannot follow this path from the writing. Can't do it. There's another powerful reason why, but we'll get to that later in the book series. Another very, very powerful reason why. Now, there's more going on than what we're perceiving right now. And this is not made clear in the books. And it's not something you can know because, well, Carlos didn't know it at the time either. But having read the whole series, I can very, very, very clearly say, hold your decisions in abeyance until you've read the entire series. Yes, hold them. Don't be taking things as absolute because things later
Okay.
are going to change your perceptions now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
So you have to put everything on pause until you've read the
I'm
whole
taking it
series.
very personally because I'm the one who is completely new to this, and I'm like, okay, oh, this is exciting. This is exciting. So yes. Okay.
Right. I mean, it's exciting and it's interesting and it's valuable, but just don't commit in until
Oh
there.
no, no.
Yeah.
Oh
Some
yes.
things, yes,
This
but
is meant for
when there's
receptivity.
any doubt, yeah, at all, say, okay, let me wait, right?
Yes. No, no, no. It is.
Very, very, very key.
I have this capital R receptivity process going on. So yes, I'm receiving it.
Correct, correct,
I'm not
correct.
to be influenced by that. Till till I will
Ah,
really check it and thinking it through to the end. So yes.
there you
Okay.
go. There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. There you go. It is so crucial. It's so crucial. It's so crucial. And the things change everything, right? Just one simple little point that Don Juan mentions, like kind of casually sometimes later on, like, oh, okay, well, this changes everything, right? No. It mainly applies to the sorcery stuff, which is why it's fascinating stuff. But to me, I de-emphasize it. It's interesting, but not valuable, right? And we know this because we don't have the specific details, and you need that there. Plus, if you're going to do this on your own and you get into trouble and you need to be pulled out, like Don Juan so often does with Carlos, who's going to do that for you? You see, so you already know this is not something you can do on your own. Yeah. And to me, I look for parts that I can do on my own. This is very important. Yes, it may be easier to do it with others and with a guide, with a teacher, but that makes you dependent. And dependency makes you vulnerable. And I do not believe, personally, I refuse to believe the universe has set things up in such a way that we have to be dependent on others. There must be a way to do it on your own. And Don Juan does confirm this.
Mm.
It's just my bent of my nature. Now, of course, you can make the point to say, yeah, but if you on your own make an effort to find a teacher, Isn't that you doing it then? Yes, it is. Okay, that's fine. That's part of you doing it on your own. Yeah. But if you don't, you still need something else in the meantime, right? You can't be dependent on that methodology only. See? No. There may be a longer, more difficult path to do it on your own, but you have to have that option. Yes, find a teacher, find a mentor, find a guide, and then it goes quicker and easier. But that's bonus, right? Has to be. All right. Huh. Let's continue. If the spot is towards the east, or if it is in that direction, he pointed to the southeast again, the results will be excellent. If the spot where your hand gets warm is towards the north, you will take a bad beating, but you may turn the tide in your favor. If the spot is towards the south, you will have a hard fight. You will need to sweep your arm up to 4 times at first, but as you become more familiar with the movement, you will need only one sweep to know whether or not your hand is going to get warm. Once you establish a spot where your hand gets warm, sit there. That is your first point if you are facing the south or the north. Yeah. Oh, I think there was a full stop there. That is your first point. If you are facing the south or the north, you have to make up your mind whether you feel strong enough to stay. If you have doubts about yourself, get up and leave. There is no need to stay if you are not confident. If you decide to stick around, clean an area big enough to build a fire about 5 feet away from your first point. The fire must be in a straight line in the direction you are looking. The area where you build the fire is your second point. Then gather all the twigs you can in between those 2 points and make a fire. Sit on your first point and look at the fire. Sooner or later, the spirit will come to you, come and you will see it. See all these complicated directions here. It's like, holy moly, man. And here's the part that bothers me about this. There's no logic in how you can acquire this knowledge. There's no, most things have, once you understand it, you can construct the logic. You can construct the sensibility, right? But in this case, there's no way to construct it. None whatsoever. Or at least not that I've ever perceived, right? If your hand does not get warm at all after 4 sweeping movements, sweep your arm slowly from north to south and then turn around and sweep it to the west. If your hand gets warm at any place towards the west, drop everything and run. Run downhill towards the flat area, and no matter what you hear or feel behind you, don't turn around. As soon as you get to that flat area, no matter how frightened you are, don't keep on running. Drop to the ground, take off your jacket, punch it around your navel, and curl up like a ball, tucking your knees against your stomach. You must also cover your eyes with your hands, and your arms have to remain tight against your thighs. You must stay in that position until morning. If you follow these simple steps, if you follow these simple steps, no harm will ever come to you. Holy moly, seriously. In case you cannot get to the flat area in time, drop to the ground right where you are. You will have a horrid time there. You will be harassed, but if you keep calm and don't move or look, you will come out of it without a single scratch. Now, if your hand does not get warm at all while you sweep it to the west, face the east again and run in an easterly direction until you're out of breath. Stop there and repeat the same movements. You must keep on running towards the east, repeating these movements until your hand gets warm. Seriously. After giving me these instructions, he made me repeat them until I had memorized them. Wow. That's quite a good feat of memorization then, yes? Wow. Then we sat in silence for a long time. I attempted to revive the conversation a couple of times, but he forced me into silence, each time with an imperative gesture. It was getting dark when Don Juan got up and without a word began climbing the hill. I followed him. At the top of the hill I performed all the movements he had prescribed. Don Juan stood by, a short distance away, and kept a sharp look on me. I was very careful and deliberately slow. I tried to feel any perceivable change of temperature, but I could not detect whether or not the palm of my hand became warm. By that time it was fairly dark, yet I was still capable of running in an easterly direction without stumbling on the shrubs. I stopped running when I was out of breath. which is not too far from my point of departure. I was extremely tired and tense. My forearms ached, and so did my calves. I repeated there all the required motions, and again had the same negative results. I ran into the dark 2 more times, and then, while I was sweeping my arm for the 3rd time, my hand became warm over a point towards the east. It was such a definite change of temperature that it startled me. I sat down and waited for Don Juan. I told him I had detected a change in temperature in my hand. He told me to proceed, and I picked all the dry brush I could find and started a fire. He sat to my left a couple of feet away. The fire drew strange dancing silhouettes. At times the flames became iridescent. They grew bluish and then brilliantly white. I explained that unusual play of colors by assuming that it was produced by some chemical property of the specific dried twigs and branches I had collected. Anything unusual in Carlos's world always has to be rationalized in terms of scientific, logical, ordinary. Right? You see this as a default pattern for him. Yeah, Beena?
Yep.
It's
Yes.
amazing, isn't it? We have to be careful of this. It's an assumption. It's a belief that overrides the reality. Yes, and that's why I was saying we have to have this understanding of exception. Very, very important. All right.
Always, always. This is something
Always, always, always.
that's like,
No, that's why
about the
assumption is the enemy of awareness.
yes, like the sensationalism.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes,
You have to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. Pay attention. Be discerning. Be aware.
yes.
Be aware. Another very unusual feature of the fire was the sparks. The new twigs I kept adding created extremely big sparks. I thought they were like tennis balls that seemed to explode in midair. I stared at the fire fixedly, the way I believed Don Juan had recommended, and I became dizzy. He handed me his water gourd and signaled me to drink. The water relaxed me and gave me a delightful feeling of freshness. Don Juan leaned over and whispered in my ear that I did not have to stare at the flames, that I should only watch in the direction of the fire. I became very cold and clammy after watching for almost an hour. At a moment when I was about to lean over and pick up a twig, something like a moth or a spot in my retina swept across from right to left between myself and the fire. I immediately recoiled. I looked at Don Juan, and he signaled me with a movement of his chin to look back at the flames. A moment later, the same shadow swept across in the opposite direction. Don Juan got up hurriedly and began piling loose dirt on top of the burning twigs until he had completely extinguished the flames. He executed the maneuver of putting out the fire with tremendous speed. By the time I moved to help him, he had finished. He stomped on the dirt on top of the smoldering twigs, and then he nearly dragged me downhill and out of the valley. He walked very fast without turning his head back and did not allow me to talk at all. When we got to my car, hours later, I asked him what was the thing I had seen. He shook his head imperatively, and we drove in complete silence. He went directly inside when we arrived at his house in the early evening, and he again hushed me up when I tried to talk. Appropriate silence, Carlos, appropriate silence. Don Juan was sitting outside behind his house. He seemed to have been waiting for me to wake up, because he started talking as I came out of the house. He said that the shadow I had seen the night before was a spirit, a force that belonged to the particular place where I had seen it. He spoke of that specific being as a useless one. It only exists. It only exists there. It has no secrets of power, so there was no point in remaining there. You would only have seen a fast passing shadow going back and forth all night. There are other types of being, however, that can give you secrets of power, if you are fortunate enough to find them. We ate some breakfast then and did not talk for quite a while. After eating, we sat in front of his house. There are 3 kinds of beings: those that cannot give anything because they have nothing to give, those that can only cause fright, and those that have gifts. The one you saw last night was a silent one. It has nothing to give. It is only a shadow. Most of the time, however, another type of being is associated with the silent one, a nasty spirit whose only quality is to cause fear. and which always hovers around the abode of a silent one. That is why I decided to get out of there fast. That nasty type follows people right into their homes and makes life impossible for them. I know people who have had to move out of their houses because of them. There are always some people who believe they can get a lot out of that kind of being. But the mere fact that the spirit is around the house does not mean anything. People may try to entice it, or they may follow it around the house under the impression that it can reveal secrets to them. But the only thing people would get is a frightful experience. I know people who took turns watching one of those nasty beings that had followed them into their house. They watched the spirit for months. Finally, someone else had to step in and drag the people out of the house. They had become weak and were wasting away. So the only wise thing one can do with that nasty type is to forget about them and leave it alone. I asked him how people enticed the spirit. He said that people took pains to figure out first where the spirit would most likely appear, and then they put weapons in its way, in hopes that it might touch the weapons, because spirits were known to like paraphernalia of war. Don Juan said that any kind of gear or any object that was touched by a spirit rightfully became a power object. However, the nasty type of being was known never to touch anything, but only to produce the auditory illusion of noise. I then asked Don Juan about the manner in which those spirits caused fear. He said that their most common way of frightening people was to appear as a dark shadow shaped like a man that would roam around the house, creating a frightening clatter or creating a sound of voices, or as a dark shadow that would suddenly lurch out from a dark corner. In Western terminology, that would be a poltergeist. Yeah, and that clatter, shake things, basically cause trouble, right? Poltergeist. Don Juan calls it the spirit poltergeist. Terminology is another thing that, like context, like assumption, we have to be very, very careful of. Just because it's poltergeist, which is polter, like trouble causing ghost, I think is more or less a direct thing, right? A translation.
Mm.
But it's classified as a ghost. Ghost, spirit. You don't know what it is. You're just putting a name on it, some sound attached to it. That just because you said it's a ghost and Don Juan says it's a spirit doesn't mean it's not the same thing. It's terminology. Who knows what they are, right? They are some form of energy that's not typical form of energy that we know. Yeah? We know things more solid, more comprehensive, right? The different kind of an energy. That's all. And when you think of them as energy, it then spirit, ghost, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Uh, Ah, Don Juan said that the third type of spirit was a true ally, a giver of secrets. That special type existed in lonely, abandoned places, places which were almost inaccessible, remote places, in other words. Yeah? He said that a man who wished to find one of these beings had to travel far and go by himself. At a distant and lonely place, that man had to take all the necessary steps alone. He had to sit by his fire. And if he saw, I read it wrong here. They had to sit by the fire. A person, right? A person at a distant and lonely place, the person had to take all the necessary steps alone. They had to sit by the fire, and if they saw the shadow, they had to leave immediately. They had to remain, however. If they encountered other conditions, such as a strong wind, that would kill their fire and keep them from kindling it again during 4 attempts. Or if a branch broke from a nearby tree, the branch really had to break, and the person had to make sure that it was not merely the sound of a branch breaking off. Other conditions they had to be aware of were rocks that rolled or pebbles that were thrown at his fire, or any constant noise. And then they had to walk in the direction in which any of these phenomena occurred until the spirit revealed itself. I don't remember the person's name, Beena, but you remember somebody came on Zoom and was chatting to us about going camping with their friend in out in the wild somewhere, remember? And she was telling us about they were sitting at the fire and pebbles were being thrown at the fire. You remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, they came on Zoom and they were talking about it. I forget her name now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she mentioned this very specifically. Now, at that time, we hadn't read this yet. And I
Mm.
told her that, because I remembered this more or less. And I mentioned about spirits, and I said, be careful. This is stuff that you're messing with stuff that you don't really know what to do. Now, it turns out that this one seemed like it was a potentially friendly one. And it turned out good for her in the end. I don't remember what the whole thing worked out, but anyway. So I'm just saying that, you know, this is stuff that we had a corroboration of from somebody who experienced this, told us about. It was very interesting. Anyway, at least, again, assuming that she was telling us, not just making up a story. I always keep that in mind. Remember, yes, I default to trusting people what they say, but in the back of my mind, I also keep in mind that they may be making this up. Will want attention sometimes, and
I don't know about this, but like many experiences like this in my life also, like not exactly like this, but for those incidents, I cannot find any explanation easily. Why I'm saying easily, because of course lack of perspective and having this ability to have multiple perspectives, uh, also in count. Uh, when we were not here living in our house for some reason, Mama was very sick at that time, so we were at our granny's house. And this house, like we had to leave it immediately, like no, in a very short notice. Like our cups were on the table, the tea cups. We were having tea, and then of course, and then it took 3 years to come back, almost. Um,
what took 3 years to come back? Sorry, I missed something there.
it took 3 years us to come back to
To
this
where?
house,
Oh,
to
oh,
this
oh, oh, oh.
to our home, and this is how it was. But anyway, but when we came back, we were coming trying, because our we had that fish aquarium, and we had 4 fish in that, like very big ones. So to feed them, my brother was continuously regularly coming. But this house was like really like becoming like a haunted house, like
Ah,
the webs and all sort of things. But the most strange thing, it makes sense because we were not living and we were nobody was taking care. So of course there's insects and things grow, and especially spiders. But we had footprints of cat footprint on our ceiling.
wow. Wow.
Yes, and
Wow.
not
Which
one,
house was
not
this, Beena?
the one we are living in.
Oh, now the apartment.
Yes,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it was not one. It was there were many, and they were like the cat was walking, but it was on the ceiling. So like
Wow.
how the cat might be walking upside down, thing like this. So it was, of course, I have so many other things also, which I'm not remembering right now, but that was very significant. That okay, we never made a big deal out of it, because okay, but, so sometimes uh, need necessity
Yeah.
makes you so daring, because we didn't had any other house to go or live, no living other than coming back. That was the only option. So
Yeah.
we had to come back. That was our property. That was our home. So and we came back. We start living. We had so many other incidents also, and people were like, "Oh, this is happening. This is happening." But we are living here. So what I'm saying, that it's like the parallel world, or the world other than what we can see with our or perceive with our senses, is not the entire world. Things happen outside our sensory world also. But the problem with us, that we always make it like, because it's new, because it's unknown, then it should be negative, which is not
Right.
necessarily the case. So in our case,
Exactly.
when that thing happened, it could be like, oh, this house is haunted. But because we know, we don't have that any other option, so that was the thing, like we have to overlook, we have to do that,
Yeah.
and we are living here, no problem. So what I'm saying,
You're
that
living there happily.
exactly. So if we would have
Yeah.
any other option,
Oh,
then it
oh,
would be
oh.
a big huge deal.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to turn on my chat, and I was just going to say when we started, I said, well, I haven't seen Joseph for a long time. And
Oh,
Joseph has
hello,
been
Joseph.
commenting.
Welcome back.
Yeah, hello, Joseph. So anyway, finish your point, and then I'll read Joseph's
And
comments.
also, you have to
And
read.
Randy Lynn as well. Yes. We'll chat about the comments in a moment. Finish your point,
Yes.
Beena. Finish your point.
What I was saying that, okay, that if we would have any other option, then we would make a like, oh my God, it's a haunted house, and then okay, yes, we cannot live, and all sort of things. Luxury, luxury of having options. We didn't had that at that time. We never had that, so that was like okay, yes, no matter what. So the awareness, deliberate unawareness at that point was a big shield for us, a big
Yeah,
leverage.
yeah,
It
wonderful.
doesn't negate the value of that thing, that yes, because
Yeah,
yes, things happen. So we
it could
just
have,
choose
but it's a choice of a path
exactly,
with many complications, and
exactly,
it's
exactly.
it's not really a choice, so we have to be
Yes,
careful.
yes, yes, yes,
Joseph makes a very cool point here. He says,
yes.
although sometimes one's hyper independence can be masking an inability to trust a psychological viewpoint. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It
Oh
is
yes,
why in Way of Impeccability, capital T trust is a huge topic. Actually, it's the only topic that has two sessions devoted to it. Yeah. It's a very, very big point. So yes, to understand the differences between regular trust, capital T trust, and how it all works together, it's way too much to explain. It's a massive, massive topic. Yes. So
yes,
trust is something that is critically important. Yes. People say, "Oh, it's love that makes the world go round." No, it's trust. Yeah. We
yes,
can live in a world without love. It's a miserable world, but in that miserable world, or it might have to be necessarily miserable, but without love, it would just be boring or neutral, right? But without trust, we have chaos, we have anarchy. Yes, cannot live
yes,
without trust. So trust is what makes the world go round. So trust is very key. Yes, Joseph, I am not personally. I do appreciate this, and hyper independence is a foolhardy approach, which is why also a key component of Way of Impeccability and Moreness culture specifically is collaboration, capital C collaboration. Capital C collaboration is inherently based on trust. Likewise, with this term that we mentioned repeatedly, receptivity. Receptivity is entirely composed of trust. Yes? Without trust, there's no receptivity. We are trusting that people make sense initially. We are trusting that they're honest. We are trusting that they're good. And we assume it as a default, as to be a fact. And we operate as if it were a fact, and we work backwards from that, right? That way we can connect to the moreness. If we are doubtful and umming and eyeing and assessing, engaging and evaluating right from the start, well, now you automatically bringing in factors which can make you see the thing not to be, and to start to discount it and devalue it. But if it's something you have no conception of and you can't imagine, it's easy to negate it. That's why we have to trust first, then, I didn't realize. Okay, and then you can conceive them all, and then you're in a different space, right? That's very, very important, right? So Randy says, Randy Lynn, welcome, Randy Lynn. I read Carlos Castaneda when I was 13 and never learned what the hell it was, but I still practice dream walking. And have kept my relationship with the blue sprites. Wow, very, very cool. Uh, Spirits must be led back to unity with acceptance and compassion. Most of the time, it's a negative emotion holding their forms here against the will of creation. How does one use compassion and acceptance effectively? All right, I'll get to your last question. On the first two, to me, if I take the entire series, and it's a long story as how I came to Carlos and came to Don Juan, but I came to it after having done a tremendous amount of my own things, and it was an intent that was satisfied. Very long story. Anyway, But looking at the entire series in the context of all of such types of information, systems of learning, because I studied them all, right? And when we understand that first and foremost, the most crucial aspect of what Don Juan is communicating is impeccability. And I have a program called Way-Of-Impeccability that takes this whole warrior's way, takes it a little bit further and simplifies, condenses, but also gets more sophisticated. And when we understand that, first of all, this is the core building point, and that the end point is freedom. Starting point is impeccability, end point is freedom. All the things to do with the spirits and the sorcery stuff is a particular path that you can take, but it's a bit of a dead end path. We actually just, I think last week or the week, not last week, previous live we did, or the live before that, Don Juan specifically says sorcery is actually more of a harm, or more of a bane, or it's a hassle in one's life. It doesn't really yield anything of true value. Yeah. So it's a path that seems to have value, but isn't really valuable. Uh, the things that they give you are valuable in the sort of temporary, relative, this ordinary world point of view, but relative to your total freedom, no. And also, he says that if you learn to perceive, and we call seeing, perceiving. Why? Because Don Juan later in the series again says this term seeing is not a good term. It misleads us to think it's something to do with the eyes. And as Carlos says here, he was hearing the holes, and he was feeling with the part that he didn't know that he was feeling with, right? And that's what perceiving is, capital P, perceiving. So we have to go beyond this. So all the sorcery stuff we can kind of set aside. When you read the whole series, you'll see later on his lineage sets it aside at some point in the lineage, and they become seers, not sorcerers, right? And or perceivers would be a better term, right? But seers is also a term that is in Western mysticism. This is a very common term. And again, it should be perceivers. What Beena and I are sharing, we are doing this reading in as part of a practice, an exercise. It's capital R reading as part of Moreness culture. And in Moreness culture, we'll use the term perceiving and perceivers, right? We want to get beyond that, right? So now we say, how do we use compassion and acceptance effectively? And I would say, going back to Way of Impeccability again, core points in Way of Impeccability: awareness, discernment, and understanding, ADU. And those three, when you utilize them and you achieve them and utilize them effectively and fully, when you've acquired them and put them into and using them, they lead you to a point where you can then apply, right? So first, if you want to use your compassion, you need awareness, right? And the awareness here is so that we can be appropriate. Right? So compassion has to be used appropriately. And in order to do that, we talked about context. We need to understand the compassion, the context in which we are applying our compassion. I may be compassionate for somebody who's suffering, and they are, struggling, and they like and are complaining. But is this somebody who is indulging in self-pity? Is it a narcissist who is suffering in order to get attention? My compassion can just exacerbate their problem and make it okay. I can condone and entrench this behavior. And now I'm not really helping them. My compassion is actually doing the very opposite. It's leading them deeper into the black hole logic that they're in, right? Into the negativity. So compassion absolutely has to be used appropriately. That's what we need the awareness for. And in order to determine things like context and appropriateness and different angles and perceptions, right, we need to have discernment, looking at things from multiple perspectives, right? We need to do this. So that's discernment, lets us look at the layers, right? That's the second part. And when we've done all that and we've perspective shifted to multiple perspectives and we've thought things through to the end, the two major techniques and tools of Way of Impeccability, we get to capital U, understanding. And when we understand, now, of course, we can apply that understanding. We can use the discernment, use the awareness to act appropriately, which in the case of somebody who's all into self-pity or the narcissist looking for attention, etc., we can not be compassionate, or we can be compassionate, but also do so appropriately, right? And the same thing with acceptance, right? It's the compassion, acceptance, very closely related, right? So to use them effectively, we need ADU, awareness, discernment, understanding, and then we have to apply those, right? The application is very, very, very key, very, very crucial, that application, right? So Joseph says, some sharing, not today, but I would like to hear as to why you became very interested in people with narcissism. Um, it was, I'll tell you real quick, Joseph, it was a request specifically. Somebody asked me, they were in a relationship with a narcissist, with a BMN, as I call them, a bullshit manipulator narcissist, because it's a more comprehensive term. And narcissism is an aspect of that. Most narcissists end up, well, they start as bullshitters, and narcissism, essentially everything they do is just bullshit, right? And so bullshit is a major component, but also the manipulation, right? And then the abuse that results from that. So it all kind of goes together, right? And so they were in this relationship with them, and they would come to me to deal with their relationship when they were married to the person. And they wanted to understand what's going on because the behavior didn't make sense, because they would many things anyway. And then we would discuss this, and they made posts about this, like a summary post, like a one-line post of the discussion that we had. And eventually they ended up divorcing the narcissist, and I helped them through the whole process. But then the person said, they had already, before the relationship, they had some tools that are part of Way of Impeccability. Not all of them, but some. But also having the discussions with me on it uh, was something that made a huge difference to them. And so the person said, I was able to get through this, but what about people who don't have this understanding, don't have this awareness? Because BMNs were not a part of this person's upbringing, and they had no conception of it, right? They had no awareness of it. So they had no understanding of it. And so my understanding of it helped them tremendously. So they said, would you please write a book on this? And that's how come. So I wrote two books, really. It's one, but I wrote the one major book, and then I had a lot of extra material, and then I published that as the second version. It's just like an extension, this detail. So that's how that came about, Joseph. No other particular reason. I mean, BMNs are all around us, and I studied people, right from get-go. When age 10, I started to be interested in awareness itself. And in order to understand awareness, understanding other people is very powerful. And when we understand people in general, how can you not understand narcissism? It's a part of our culture, especially in a superiority culture. Yeah, this is a very important thing. So narcissism, my interest in it is not just in understanding um, narcissism, but understanding superiority culture, right? Which is our default culture. And our default culture gives rise, it creates all the fertile ground for narcissism to grow out of, right? And so it's all part of greater capital U understanding. I want to understand people, life, how things work, psychology. Yeah, I want to understand it all. And I made a massive effort to do so. I mean, I studied people inside out, backwards, forwards, left, right, and center. I think I mentioned this to you before. A lot of people who listen and hear, they think of me as, at least in the past, especially now, maybe different, but like you're a philosopher. I'm much more of a psychologist than I am a philosopher. Yes, I am a philosopher, but much more focused from the psychological point of things. My understanding of psychology is very different, and I would put my understanding of psychology up there with anybody without being egotistical, truly, because I understand motivation, and I call my psychology motive psychology. You understand motivations, everything comes. Like Jones the alien said, understand motivations, understand people. And in
Yes, yes.
brackets, then you'll know whether they're good to eat or not. Anyway, one of my fictional character,
It's not,
Jones the aliens. So
oh,
Randy
yes.
says,
Something.
I lose a lot of myself to compassion and radical acceptance, which distract me from this act of being ADU. This is very powerful. Now, Randy, let's look at motivations. Yes. When you lose yourself to compassion and radical acceptance, is the motivation to be fit in to not be different, to not stand out. Yeah. So we have to look at the enemies of awareness. Yeah. And Don Juan, in Don Juan, right, the four enemies of a person of knowledge, right, which was fear, clarity, power, and old age. Now, in Way of Impeccability, we take that a little bit further, and I will get to that in a moment. Yeah, I just got to pull that up here, right? And in this, we have to understand habit for one, yes. But in this case, let's look very much at fear, yes, and we'll look at what is it that we are afraid of. We are afraid so often of standing alone.
Mm.
So we do things that make us fit in, like compassion and like acceptance. Not only do they make us fit in, but they make us non-threatening. Sometimes just standing alone makes us threatening to others. I'm not being threatening in an absolute sense, but my independence is threatening to others who want to dominate and bully. Yeah. I'm not threatening them directly, but they're going to take it as threatening. So we have to be very, very cautious of this. Now, the solution is change your environment. If you're in an environment where the people around you are threatened by you being independent, change your environment. Because changing others, forget it. This is a lost cause. Yeah. And it's just a waste of time and energy and effort. Yeah. Can't change others. They have to change themselves. So change your environment where you can be independent. And this is part of what Beena and I are doing. Moreness-Culture, which is the big umbrella under which we are doing all of what we do. In Moreness-Culture, acceptance is taken for granted. Why? Because in Moreness-Culture, we celebrate difference. Yeah, difference isn't seen as something as threatening, which it is in superiority paradigm culture. So to answer your question also, Joseph, my interest in narcissism isn't a specific interest in narcissism. It is understanding the superiority paradigm. When I wrote the book, the book was primarily focused on bullshit. But I couldn't call it The Psychology of Bullshit, which really is a good title for it, because I cannot advertise that with bullshit in the title. I can have it and sell it, but I can't advertise it. Just the weirdness of the world. But when I made a course out of it, a program, which it is, like capital H-Hearing and Way of Impeccability, it's a big, massive course, minimum 4 months, probably take a year to do it properly. If you really want to understand. And the course is called The Psychology of the Superiority Paradigm. Yeah. And again, I didn't call the book that because it takes a lot of explaining to explain the paradigm and all this. Anyway, that's the course. So my interest isn't in narcissism. It is in understanding the default culture, which happens to be superiority culture, superiority paradigm, right? And it's not just the default culture, but it's the default paradigm, which affects everything we're coming into. And look with Randy now. Yes, when Randy is being compassionate and accepting in a superiority paradigm, this could be perceived as weakness and make him a target and cause him lots of hassle, right? Because in superiority, it's all about dominance and hierarchy. And if somebody's weak, you pounce on them, you push them down. I mean, just observe chickens and chicken pecking order, right? We have psychological pecking orders. It's the default of superiority paradigm. It's just a load of rubbish. It's really horrible, right? So let's see. I lose a lot of myself to compassion. Yes, because if you're losing yourself, I would assume that you're being artificial. You're not being real and true. Yeah, whenever we are being artificial, we lose ourselves. Yeah, it's everything. So we have to be real to ourselves. Core to Way of Impeccability. The first requirement, the most important requirement, is self-honesty. And you are being self-honest now. So be aware of it and identify the causes. And usually it's fear, like I said, fear of retribution, fear of bullying, fear of dominance, fear of hassle, fear of aggravation. All of this, again, sometimes you need to change your environment. Yeah, yeah. You're a shaman, says Randy. No, no, into which specifically? I didn't see when your no came, Randy. If you can elaborate on which specific no. Now, while you respond to that, Joseph says, new focused perspective of things you are talking about defeat culture. I just finished the book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. Yes, normal is a complete and utter myth. Yes, it's something I've been saying forever, right? And this, when we look at and understand the superiority paradigm and understand this whole myth of normal, everything starts to fall into it. Very cool, Joseph, very cool. And he said, I have made massive changes to my environment recently. Wonderful, 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 Randy. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. So it starts with that, right? And then it starts with building a new you. Yes, this is a very, very key point. And to build that independence of being. The whole point and aim of Way of Impeccability is independence of being. It's very, very, very key. And part of independence of being is what I was saying earlier, receptivity. Receptivity says, I will not be influenced. Doesn't matter how valuable somebody's knowledge is. Don Juan, if we were to literally have Don Juan be a part of our group and interact with him and hang out with him daily and we're discussing it, we will never be influenced by Don Juan. We know Don Juan. I mean, this literal Don Juan here now, right? We know his value. We know how awesome he is. But that doesn't mean we are going to just accept everything that comes into us. No. Yes, we will consider it. We will reflect on it. We will perspective shift on it. And then if it makes sense to us and we can clearly, and we understand that there is a sense to it and we figure out what that sense is, then once we figured out what that sense is, we will make it our own. Absolutely crucial conception in Way of Impeccability. Absolutely crucial. It is crucial to Moreness and Moreness culture, making it our own. Why is it so crucial? Because otherwise, you cannot have independence of being. All the information that you get, all the wisdom, if it's somebody else's, you end up living their lives, not your own. The only way you can have independence of being is when you take that knowledge, that information, and make it your own. That's why in Way of Impeccability, when you do it as a program, right, you're going to do repeat backs and takeaways because this is a mechanism for making it your own. Absolutely crucial. Yeah. All right. Impeccability says Randy, question mark. I don't hear the word often, and I definitely want to remember. All right. So we a bit over time, but fine. Since you asked, Randy, we'll always do appropriateness. So Don Juan talks about impeccability, and we're going to see in the next book, it's going to be the focus of the next book when Don Juan is sharing the warrior's way. I've taken this because to me, I did a lot of things. I developed my own stuff before I encountered Don Juan. And for me, impeccability was always understood as rightness. Not rightness in a moral or religious sense, but rightness as in appropriateness, right? And when I came to Don Juan, he used the term impeccable. That's really the term, okay? So I loved Don Juan right from the start because of his use of language. And personally, I've taken that further, right? So in Way of Impeccability, we have a dictionary of power and we understand conceptuality and a lot of stuff. There's a lot to it. All right. Randy says, I owe a lot of my personal progress to luck and intuition, to be honest. It's not luck, it's intent. When you have the intent to grow, if you only have an intent to moreness and intent to goodness, then we get lucky. It's not luck, it's the universe assisting you. The point and purpose of the universe is the development and enhancement of awareness. If you are making this effort to self-improve, to grow your awareness, to grow your discernment, to grow your understanding, the universe is going to help you and your life is going to seem very, very lucky. Yeah. Very, very powerful. All right, Randy, before you go, I want to read something to you, which is extended understandings of impeccability. So hold on one second. I'm going to screen share, and then we can look at this. Right? It will give you a nice comprehensive understanding of impeccability. Right? So we're taking this term and we're going into depth in detail about it. Anything to add before I share this, Beena?
Sorry, say it again. Yes.
Anything to add before I share about the detailed understanding of impeccability?
You already shared that, because what Randy was saying, it was about receptivity, and
Yeah,
also
yeah,
what he
yeah,
was saying about compassion. It's a misunderstanding what compassion actually is,
yeah,
because we
mostly.
assume that
Yeah,
having this understanding of someone's perspective, like if compassion, mostly I'm just using one term, one
yeah,
aspect of it, that someone is going through some hard time or some misery, some problem, we
right.
assume that if we are understanding their perspective, we have to be only on their side and stick to
That's
that perspective.
sympathy, not compassion.
That's yes,
Yeah,
that's the problem, that we assume that it's a
we're
misunderstanding.
confused. Yes,
Compassion, yes.
yes, yes,
Compassion
yes.
is that, okay, I understand what you are going through, what you are feeling, what you are going
Correct,
through, but
correct.
the compassion demands me to be impeccable,
Yeah,
and make any decision. Okay, I can, if I can provide a different perspective, wonderful. If I cannot, just to make it easier for you, that's the
yes,
only thing. I don't need to agree
yes,
with nothing, I
yes.
don't need to be party on your side, no, nothing.
Yeah,
Compassion is just understanding, so yes.
right, right. All right, so let me get back to you. Again, conceptionality. Another term for way of impeccability is the language of conceptionality. We really, really, really need to make an effort to conceptualize these concepts appropriately. Sympathy, compassion, these are concepts. Acceptance, they are concepts. And again, if we don't have clarity in understanding them, then we get confused. Like Beena says, most people confuse compassion with sympathy or empathy. Not the same thing, right? But let's get to impeccability, because this is the core conception, like appropriateness. Appropriateness is the overall super major one. Impeccability and appropriateness could be considered synonyms, could be considered similar, but one is a bit more specific than the other. Right? All right, so let's look at this. Yes. Did I do a general or hang on? Sorry, let me just. I'll click too fast there. Sorry. I want to share just this page only, so you don't have the rest of my screen. Yeah. Uh, Here we go. Okay. Yeah, don't want to have distractions here. This is very important what I'm about to share. All right. All right. Extended understandings of impeccability. I was asked this question. Is there such a way to give a mini explanation of the word impeccable, impeccableness? Yes. Impeccability is best use of energy. That's the core, right? Now, what does best mean? Very important, right? This is Don Juan's understanding of impeccability also. Yes, he uses that in exact terms. He says impeccability is the best use of energy. Then we get into specifics, because he doesn't really go much further than that. It's about his only understanding of it, right? Or the definition of it. But we're going to go further. That's what we're doing in Way of Impeccability. We go further, we add more. Impeccability is giving due respect. Due. See, due is emphasized there. It's very important, this due. Yeah. Impeccability is uncompromising self-honesty. Impeccability is living with true integrity. Absolutely critical. Do anything that compromises your integrity, like in a ship, hull integrity. If you lose hull integrity, there's the plank shift and there's a gap there, or you get a hole in the ship, well, you take on water. You can sail in, well, at least olden time ships, right? Or a ship can continue to go with leaks in it, but then you have to pump it out and it causes ballast issues and all sorts of problems, right? So when you compromise your integrity, like for instance, if you have a ship that's got water in the bilge down at the bottom, right? It's taking on water and you're pumping it out, but there's water floating around. What happens if that ship tips? A wave comes and balances the ship. All that water at the bottom shifts to the side where you do not want it, aggravating the tilt and can cause your ship to capsize. In other words, when you have that, your integrity is compromised. You can be okay in normal conditions, but the moment things get a little bit out of whack and the wind comes up and the boat starts leaning, or a wave comes and tilts the boat, all that imbalance that's lying around there normally and it's okay, now suddenly throws you right out of that and you lost. Yeah. So integrity is super critical, and of course, over time, that water, it rots and stinks and causes problems, and you get this can get ill from it. And literally in a ship, right? When you have rotten bilge water, right? I mean, it's a very harmful thing. And of course, the holes start to get bigger and causes also, eventually your ship will sink. Yeah, or flounder or whatever. It causes problems, right? So integrity, very crucial. Impeccability is making sure non-use of energy is not going to be a problem, non-action. Yeah. So it's not just what you're doing, but also what you're not doing. For instance, it's not what you're doing in an environment if you're living with a bunch of people that are all narcissists or BMNs and whatever. It's the non-action is you're not moving away from them, right? So it's not specifically what you're doing, but you're not moving away. So you're aggravating the problem, right? Just to use a more rare example here. Impeccability is doing more than enough to make sure we're covered. And basically to make sure our asses are covered, right? In a more common thing, right? And no regrets. And I don't mean covered here in the sense of like a narcissist or a BMN where they are looking to make sure that they're not going to get caught out. No, this is about our honor and our integrity. Yes. So when we are doing more than enough to make sure we are covered, we have no regrets. This is being thorough, being scrupulous, scrupulous, being diligent, yes, and being conscientious, going through all the way, doing your due diligence, doing your research, yeah, so that this is where we are doing more than enough, so that when I make a decision, when I take an action, whatever happens, I say, well, I have no regrets because my decision was impeccable at the time, even if it doesn't work out the way I thought it was. But I cannot regret when I've done more than enough to make sure that my action will be appropriate. Yes, very, very important point. And yeah, it comes. Impeccability is being thorough, diligent, scrupulous, conscientious, etc. Those 2 points, they go together. Yes. And the third one too. Yeah. Well, actually, all of these go together. Yeah. Impeccability is making sure one is unblameable, unfaultable by one's own conscience. That doesn't mean always being right. That doesn't mean not doing things where they go FUBAR and it's like a whole great big mess. No, that can happen. But if you've been impeccable, then you have to relook at that and understand that to be a fortuitous mistake. And always, when we've been impeccable and things don't turn out the way we thought they would, and we look closely, we see, oh, this is causing me to change tracks, to jump into a whole nother reality and do something I would otherwise never have thought to do. Yes. And very, very powerful. I mean, I've seen this many, many times, and it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. Right? Impeccability is acting so we cannot have any regrets. Acting so we cannot have any regrets. Impeccability is doing what's right according to our own conscience, acting in accordance with our conscience. Now, this is very key to understand here, yes? And you'll see right is capital R right. Not right in the usual understanding of, moralistic right and wrong, cultural morals, religious morals, etc. No, it's right according to our own conscience. That's a capital R right. We are deciding, not anybody else. Because when it comes to doing what's right, only you can decide. If you are living according to somebody else's thing, you are acting under a belief. You don't know for sure. You're just trusting them, and they may be wrong. And we see this all the time. People doing horrid things because they're doing what's right, but right according to somebody else. Yeah? Horrible. So very, very key point to impeccability. Impeccability is doing everything we can and more to minimize foolishness. Huge, 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 right? Minimize foolishness. Minimize the chances of the unforeseen happening, cutting them to a minimum. I'll read your comment in a moment, Randy. I just want to get to the end of this. We're nearly at the end here. Impeccability is applying all necessary effort required. Necessary effort. Not undue effort, not wasteful effort, but necessary effort. And capital T trusting, Nobelia trusting, impeccably, when we've done all this, that things will turn out good. Yeah, we have to have that capital T trust, right? Absolutely important. When you've been impeccable, you have to have capital T trust. It's part of impeccability to capital T trust, right? But first you have to be impeccable, then you can have capital T trust. Thus, acting and behaving and doing all we can So doubt is never an issue. Yeah, very important. And then the questioner says, sort of unimpeachable. They misunderstood a little bit, but it was a good question, though. In a way, yes, exactly. Unimpeachable by our own conscience. Yes, and there's a quote here. A young man quote, conscience demands impeccability. Right. So this seems sound. I can practice these attributes. I strive so hard for balance, but balance won't keep me focused on my own prosperity. Yes, yes. Capital B, balance means appropriateness, right? So just to leave you, I will say, if you are in life and you have a doubt of any kind, get into the habit of saying, asking yourself the question, is what I'm doing appropriate? Appropriate in all contexts, not just appropriate in the context of the immediate thing, your internal stuff and your local stuff, maybe the greater context, but in the context of your life and time as well. When you ask this, oh, is it appropriate in terms of my death, in terms of my entire life, in terms of my soul, my spirit? Changes everything, yes? So we want to have appropriateness in the greater context, in the overall context, and in the immediate and in the internal context, in the intermediate and local context. Yes, all contexts. So just keep asking, get into the habit of saying, is this appropriate? Is this appropriate? Is this appropriate? And in what context is appropriate? And also, context is one part of what determines appropriateness. The other part is your goals, your intents, your desires. Yes, what you're attempting to do. If you're attempting to do one thing, the behavior can be appropriate, but if you're attempting to do something else, the behavior is inappropriate. And likewise with context. Appropriateness is a variable, it's not an absolute. Appropriateness changes depending on context and goals, motivations, and intents. Yeah. So just make sure to look at what your goals are and what the context is, and then determine your appropriateness, right? Determine the appropriateness of your goals and your intents. Way-of-Impeccability starts. Module 1, Session 1 is clarity of intent. Intent, not clarity of goals, not clarity of ambitions, aspirations, motivations, clarity of intent. It's a different animal, intent, yeah? So a lot to understand, a lot to understand. All right, very, very, very cool. Very, very cool. Wonderful, Randy, wonderful. Randy, let me see. I want to share that list for you. Yeah, so that it's there, that you can come back to it, right? Not just have to come back to the video. Yeah. So I'm gonna see if I can paste it as a. There we go. There we go. All right. The formatting is messed up here, but okay, it's there. It didn't save my lines, but it's there. So all right, all good. All good. Yeah, I mean, it's in the comment there. You can see it on YouTube as a comment. Yes, Randy? I hope so. I hope so. Well, I don't know if it posted or not. I don't know. Anyway, I'll go back and check on YouTube and see if it posted. All right. On that note, thank you very much for the interaction. Joseph, as always, yes, very great to see you here. And yeah. So we'll talk more about this normality as well. Myth of normal. Yeah, it's a big myth. I made this point many times. Is this appropriate? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It is such a ridiculous question, a ridiculously powerful question. Appropriateness is the core of my entire philosophy, the entire structure of what I have. When we understand appropriateness and everything follows from there, then it all falls into place. Everything. Our pleasure, our pleasure. Randy says thank you also, and Beena. Absolute pleasure. Absolute. Right, Beena?
Oh, yes, yes. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And we really enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
And
We
you
we
can
we,
find
we
us
love
regularly here
interaction.
almost every day except Saturdays and Thursdays. But yeah, we are here at the
Yeah,
same time.
yeah. So on Thursdays we do our TV show called The Moreness Show, where we
Yes.
are focusing specifically on Moreness and Moreness culture. And if you do watch those, I recommend going back to the first episode and watching from there, right? And you can build it because there's a lot there. There's a lot there. Yeah. Such a pleasure, Randy. I really hope we see you more regularly. This would be really great. This would be really, really great. So wonderful, wonderful. Like Joseph, we see Joseph regularly, and we have fantastic interactions. And Joseph's sharing is inherent. It's crucial. It's key to Moreness culture. Sharing, not telling. Sharing. I'm sharing what is valuable to me. I'm sharing what's important to me. I will never, even though it may seem like it sometimes, but me sharing about impeccability, I'm sharing what I understand impeccability. I'm not saying to you, Randy, you must use this, you must know. That's telling. I'm sharing this is how I understand it. This is how it's valuable to me. Yeah. And how it is within Way of Impeccability. Now, if one comes and does the program, then you're gonna get to it. But that's a different story. Then you come at things from a different angle. But still, sharing, very key. Sharing, very key. So we love your sharing, and we love Joseph's sharing. It's very cool. Very, very cool. I promise to come back. It would be quite appropriate, in fact. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. All right. So we look forward to seeing her, and we start at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. I don't know what time zone you're in, but essentially 2 hours before now, whatever your local time is, roughly 2 hours before now. Yeah. And then that's when we start every day except Thursdays and Saturdays. But Thursdays we're going to do the show, and the show is available on all sorts of different programs and play platforms. The easiest way to find the episodes of the show is on my website, or our website, nobelia.org/Moreness show. Ends up 3 S's in a row there, but so be it. That's just how it works out. So you can see all the back episodes of the Moreness show there. And we started relatively recently. I think we're going to be doing episode 5 or 6 next week. So yeah, very cool stuff. But you can see them all there. Very easy to connect to. Wonderful. All right. Beena, any closing comments? And love to see you again, Joseph. It's wonderful, man. Wonderful to
Oh
have you here.
yes, and it was wonderful. Though we exceed our usual time, but it is again as appropriate. Sometimes we
Exactly.
really are.
Exactly.
And when other people are here, of course we enjoy more. So this is
Yes.
all about
Yeah.
bonus, and this is the bonus show. Of course, we don't call it. We say that these are our lives, but again, it's all about bonus. They'll always say that
Exactly.
everything
Exactly.
he is
Right.
about sharing
Right.
bonus. Thank you
Right.
so much, Randy, and thank you so much, Joseph. Yes, we were missing you. At least I can
Yes.
say yes,
Yes,
I was.
absolutely. We were. We
Yes,
were. Yeah.
yes, yes. And it's always good to have that. Today,
I know.
again, just to encapsulate everything, and as a reminder for myself that okay, we re we reread or we relearn about receptivity, about compassion,
Yeah.
about moreness, about impeccability. In just one session, how much we get. So this is the value. And of course, I'm just emphasizing for myself because when we emphasize on value, how much value we have already acquired, how much value we have, and how much we can acquire more. Every single time when we
Value.
emphasize on what
Value.
we have acquired, it gives our subconscious the message that if we can acquire now, we can acquire more. This is the message I want for my subconscious always having. This is the magic of emphasis, precise, focused, appropriate emphasis on positivity, on value, opens the door for moreness to you.
Value. 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 Capital V, value, and capital U, usefulness. This is what
Exactly.
it's about for us. Everything we do is about value and usefulness. Yeah. We're not interested in theoretical things and intellectual ideas. No, we've got to be able to use them. Otherwise, they're meaningless. Yeah.
Yes,
Very,
and the
very cool.
question Joseph asked today to you that why you are so interested in the narcissism and in other words superiority paradigm, because actually you are interested in superiority paradigm, not the
Right.
narcissism only.
But it's only a
Exactly.
subsection. It only
Exactly.
seems like I'm excessively interested because I'm focusing on it. But ask me about other things and I'll go into even more depth. Right?
Yes,
It just happens
but
to be that I
but I
make an
can,
effort to know what I'm talking about.
yes,
Oh,
but I just want to add something because and Joseph, this is just my understanding so far that about the superiority paradigm, anyone who is interested in spirituality, capital S spirituality, for any reason, like just okay, just for the sake of being cool, or just okay, really want to have something more than, if this life is not satisfying for them, whatever the reason is, if anyone is interested in spirituality, ultimately by default, it's like really compulsory for them to understand what is spiritually not.
Exactly. Exactly.
And and
Yeah.
superiority paradigm is in a way opposite to the spiritual
Yeah.
paradigm.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So if you really want to understand what spirituality is, we need to understand what superiority paradigm is.
Right. Let's use a nice example to illustrate this. We go out into nature to commune with nature. And I don't mean it in a negative way, but to commune with nature, to get spirituality out there, to get the moreness out of nature, right? And we go off into the forest. If we don't have an awareness about bears and pumas and lions and tigers and whatever you can find in the forest, and snakes and whatever, you can be blindsided by this, and there goes your spirituality, and you get into trouble. And that's the same in life. We need to have a full understanding of the environment we are in. And in that environment, there's lots of positive, but there's also potential negative. Now, I may go out into the forest 1,000 times and never encounter a bear or a puma or any hostile thing. But it's that 1,001th time when I do encounter it that might kill me or cause me severe harm, right? So I need to be aware. And likewise in life. Yeah. Now, in our daily lives, we encounter superiority and the nonsense of it much more regularly. Bullying, negativity, criticism, people trying to pull you down. We encounter this much more regularly, much more so than the negativity of the forest or the jungle, right? Or the veld or the bush, whatever. So it's very, very, very important to be aware of that negativity so you don't get blindsided, you don't get negatively affected by it. Because otherwise, you might not even get out of your journey. If you're in a superiority paradigm environment and you want to be more, that more is seen as a threat, and you're going to be pulled down, and you might not even get out of it, right? So very important to understand it, to be aware. And also, how can we understand an alternative paradigm if we're not aware that the superiority paradigm is a paradigm? See? So it's very crucial to understand this. Very, very crucial. That's why it's part of the components of the Greater Moreness Project. The core is Way-Of-Impeccability. You've got capital H hearing, superiority paradigm, and then as a bonus, if that's where your predilection lies, you've got nobility and all of that. Yeah. So it's the whole Moreness Project. But if you really want to understand and get out of things, you need to understand all the component elements. Yeah. Very important. Very important. All right. All right. Lulu Belayula. I have no idea what that means. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but I think if you sing it or shout it, it's going to sound very cool. Wonderful, Randy. Wonderful, Randy. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Beena? Are you gone already, Beena?
No, I'm here. Okay. Thank
Oh.
you so much, everyone, for joining us.